Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind troubled with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems, the ones you can't solve right now, and will be easier to solve while rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. Let my voice wash over you at a comfortable volume, and allow yourself to be distracted from the stresses and worries that play on your mind. Whether you need help falling asleep or going back to sleep in the middle of the night, you can trust me to keep you company and help you to wake up tomorrow in a rested state. You may need to try out Sleepy Time Tales for a few nights to get used to the slightly strange idea, but I believe it will be well worth your while. Because I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So settle down, relax, and allow yourself to get lost in my telling of tonight's story. Before we get on with tonight's reading, I'd like to ask for a couple of minutes of your time. If you find Sleepy Time Tales useful, if it helps you to get a restful night, and you would like to help me keep it going out to thousands of insomniacs just like you, and you have the means to help out, please consider supporting on the Patreon at patreon.com/sleepytimetales. This is monthly support that not only helps me keep the lights on, but can get you fun bonuses based on your contribution level. You get bonuses from as little as $2 a month, but the real fun happens from $5. So if you want to check out what's available, go across there, once again, patreon.com/sleepytimetales, and have a look. But times are quite tough for a lot of people. Some monthly commitment may be more than you can do, in which case you can make once-off contributions to the tip jar on the website. If you just go across there, sleepytimetales.net, and click on the donate button. I've spoken recently about the struggle to keep Sleepy Time Tales going, because the support has fallen off despite the audience growing, and it's felt like it's tough to justify. So a lot of listeners have stepped up and really thrown their support in, and it's very much appreciated. The show's not quite on the bubble, but I would like to keep it growing, because I would like to be able to focus more time on this, do some more stuff, maybe even release more episodes. So if you'd like to help me grow the show and help me continue to help you and others, please consider supporting if you can. And of course, if you can't afford to, it's completely understandable. I know as well as most people how times are tough. Another way to help the show is simply to tell people. So if you like the show, if it helps you, and you meet someone who you think it will help, just tell them about it. It's easy as that. That's all you need to do. Thanks for your time. Let's get back to the show. We return once again to Old Glass and How to Collect It by J. Sidney Lewis, and we pick up learning about Bristol and Nailsea glass. Many examples from the Bristol factories are to be found in the various museums, especially at South Kensington, where in the famous Schreiber collection are some of the finest examples extant. There is, for example, a Venetian glass, purely Bristol of course, but on a Venetian model, which is reproduced as a frontispiece to this volume. And also a pair of candlesticks, beautifully ornamented with butterflies, wildflowers, and leaves. They stand out as most admirable specimens from the Bristol factories. It is a well-known fact that the Bristol product, so admirable was it in its quality and appearance, and so closely did it resemble the real Venetian glass, was often passed off as the product of the Venetian glassmakers, the past masters of the art. Many a collection, ostensibly hailing from Venice, must, on a closer scrutiny, be attributed to a place of origin much nearer home. This form of substitution was particularly prevalent in the case of glass ornamented with white twisted threads, and in the case of ruby-colored glasses and mugs. Many of the earliest specimens were left raw at the base, and if the finger be drawn across the ends, the existence of sharp edges will become apparent. This is a test of reasonably good value, as I've found on more than one occasion, when I've been in doubt. Also, and with the smaller pieces in particular, it was almost universal with the Bristol manufacturer to leave untouched the mark, or place where the piece was nipped from the blower's tube. Modern reproductions, whilst faithfully observing and imitating all the beauties of the model, have generally their bases perfectly smooth. Even where the mark has been imitated to give an added air of verisimilitude to the specimen, the thing has been overdone, and that is so awkwardly as inevitably to lead to detection. Sometimes, too, in the imitation, the colors used to produce the milky white tone cease abruptly, leaving the mark perfectly transparent. In genuine Old Bristol, the color fades gradually, leaving only the very tip of the mark clear. Another good test is to place the specimen in a strong light, preferably sunlight. If, when examined, the color is mixed, the piece is of doubtful authenticity. Spurious specimens often run cloudy or patchy, possibly because of bad mixing. This is, of course, a useful test, provided one does not rely upon it entirely. For certain specimens of undoubted authenticity display somewhat similar features. In particular, I remember an old drinking flask, marked with irregular streaks of white, where this test would have proved absolutely misleading. Possibly the feel of the glass is the best criterion, genuine Old Bristol being much softer to the touch than any modern imitation. So many pitfalls await the average collector of Bristol glass that I should hardly advise anyone to make this his sole hobby. Although it is still possible to find small pieces, cups, salt cellars, small bowls, finger basins, mugs and the like, the really important pieces of Bristol glass are few, and they and their owners are pretty well known to the cognoscenti. At any rate, I have not yet met anyone in recent years who could boast of a considerable find in this direction. A very fine specimen, described as Old Bristol 1760, was put up for sale some 18 months ago near London. Its genuineness was further guaranteed by a label pasted on the base, showing that it passed through a well-known London auction room. The owner, a dealer in a small way, failing to find a customer in London, had put it on to sale of the effects of a cottage. It was bought in by its owner for £3 3 shillings, and eventually at the end of the day realized only 36 shillings. I saw the piece subsequently. It was obviously a reproduction, though a very good one, and certainly worth what it was given for it. But as he had purchased it as real old glass and at a proportionate figure, it will, I fancy, be a long time before he again endeavours to secure a bargain in Old Bristol. I have known many such instances, and as a result of my experience, I have come to the conclusion that while pieces of Bristol can be picked up now and again, particularly in the west of England, it will not pay the amateur collector to confine himself to this particular variety. I am indebted to Mr. Cole of South Molton Street, London, for the illustration of a pair of very fine early Bristol vases, which, although undecorated, are exquisite in colour and form, and a beautiful example of the maker's art. The frilling around the base deserves special notice. The central piece in the photograph is a long-necked vase decorated with coloured enamels, and known to be the work of Michael Edkin, a Bristol enameller of distinction. If carefully examined, it affords ample evidence of the skill and painstaking care to which the best specimens of this ware owe their artistic merit. Spiral wine glasses are still often to be found in or near Bristol, and the fact that these are rarely found in other parts of the country seems to indicate that they were a favourite form with Bristol glassmakers. Among the examples of Bristol ware here reproduced is included a pair of vases. These rank among the finest specimens still extant of Michael Edkin's work. This talented artist was a painter of some merit, who gradually drifted into glass painting, and for some 26 years, from 1762 to 1788, was engaged by various firms to decorate their ware with birds, flowers, etc. He was also, it may be added, a singer and an actor of no little distinction. Figure 26 shows a pair of candlesticks, 6.5 inches in height, from the British Museum collection. They are excellent examples of Edkin's taste and delicacy of execution. Great quantities of glass decorated by him must have been exported, and I have found undoubted specimens of his work in Rome and the museums of other continental cities I have visited. One of the very finest specimens of his art is a richly gilt and decorated tea tray, now in the Museum of Practical Geology. Another example from the British Museum collection is the fine mug, ornamented with a portrait and the word liberty in gold, possibly made by some sympathizer with the revolutionary spirit, which strongly affected Britain as well as France towards the close of the 18th century. Edkin also decorated many blue ground pieces, and it is interesting to learn that his remuneration for the ornamentation of a jug in colour and gilt, which must have taken a considerable time, was the lordly sum of 8 pence, a striking commentary upon the value placed upon skilled craftsmanship in the 18th century. Like many other artists, he had to be content with the posthumous reward which fame bestows. The Bristol factories are said to have made all sorts of articles, flasks, bells, walking sticks, bellows, etc. in glass. But there is much uncertainty on this head, and I doubt if the greater part of such articles classified as coming from Bristol could not, as a matter of fact, claim Nailsea as their place of origin. We can certainly ascribe oil, vinegar, and pepper pots, candlesticks, salt cellars, and vases to Bristol, as the daintily decorated pepper and sugar casters shown in Figure 27 prove, so that it is at least possible for the other articles enumerated also to have been made there. But where there is so much uncertainty, the collector who desires to be on the safe side had better refrain from giving Bristol the benefit of the doubt. It must not be inferred, however, that all Bristol glass is of the opaque kind. The magnificent piece shown in the frontispiece is quite transparent, the apparent opacity of the background of the landscape being due to enamel laid on the glass. The fine decanter reproduced in Figure 25 is also an example of what Bristol could do in transparent glass, the decoration, here again, being in enamel. Nailsea glass. The glass works of Nailsea were established in 1788, a few miles to the southwest of Bristol, and were for some time carried on with success. But the ware was crude and lacking in the finish characteristic of the best Bristol specimens. The earliest pieces were made of yellowish or dark green glass with blotches of white, as in the jug shown in Figure 28. They were usually very inferior in style, colour, texture, and workmanship, and were consequently not greatly sought after by purchasers. Hence the output was restricted, and the factory after a while seems to have confined its efforts to producing plain white glass with quaint and curious forms of decoration. A pair of bellows, for example, was decorated like the fins of a fish, with tiny projections and spines all over it. Towards the end of its career, which closed in 1763, the output was a clear glass of greenish tint, with faintly coloured streaks. Figure 29 is a characteristic example. I've also seen a few pieces gilt. The glass is now exceedingly scarce, and good specimens command a very high price. There is a curious charm about Nailsea glass. In appearance, the best specimens are of a dark toffee-like colour, and when held up to a strong light, exhibit a greenish tinge. The lighter and finer kinds display a characteristic ground, which, if not beautiful, is certainly quaint. Collectors who are fortunate enough to come across a specimen of Nailsea at a reasonable figure should undoubtedly seize the opportunity of acquiring it. But such opportunities are few, and were they more numerous, it is hardly likely that anyone would wish to form a large collection of it. The Simpson jug, illustrated in Figure 28, is transparent, but of a curious yellowish-green tinge, and is probably one of the last pieces produced at the old factory. Chapter 6. Irish Glass. Cork and Waterford. The history of the manufacture of glass in Ireland is very obscure, and the dates of its various periods difficult to fix. Hence it is well nigh impossible to place before the reader any reliable data, in the way of photographs of pieces, that can be guaranteed authentic, both as regards place of origin and date. Yet numerous specimens do exist, including drinking glasses of all shapes and sizes, as well as fruit dishes, epigenes, sweetmeat glasses, decanters, and salt cellars, which are undoubtedly Irish in their origin, and which are generally known as Waterford glass. As far as can be determined, glass making in various forms, enamelling, and even mosaic work and cameos were carried on in Ireland as early as the beginning of the 8th century. The finest examples of the earliest period are to be found in the Royal Irish Antiquities collection, which includes the famous Ardagh chalice, the Tara brooch, the Cross of Cong, and the crozier of Clonmacnoise, as well as other well-known and interesting exhibits. At any rate, experts are agreed that even at this early date, the art of enamelling on glass was practiced in Ireland, being probably introduced by the Phoenicians, who in turn had acquired the art from ancient Egypt. In support of this belief is the fact that a large piece of red-enamelled glass was found in the Rath of Calshon on Tara Hill. But it is equally clear that the art of glassmaking, if reduced at the time mentioned, speedily fell into desuetude, for there is no mention of any manufacture of glass between the 9th and 17th centuries, nor are there to be found any specimens which may be attributed to this period. There are further no traces of the manufacture even of window glass of the commonest description. In the 17th century, however, there were many interesting squabbles with regard to glass-making patents and their infringement, and there are records of petitions to the king concerning them. But from the patent roll of King James I, it appears that little was done. Still, we have it on record that permission was given to import glass in 1675, and it is suggested that craftsmen in Ireland, attempted to imitate the work of continental glass workers, and various sums of money were granted by the universities and others interested to assist them in so doing. Some progress undoubtedly was made, for it is clear that by the 18th century factories were in existence, and glass was being actually made in Dublin, Waterford, Cork, Belfast, and Londonderry. Some examples of early Waterford glass are, as far as shape and size go, replicas of glasses made in England at about the same period. But the reason for the almost immediate popularity of the Irish glass was its perfection of colour. A fine specimen which recently came under my notice is a preserved jar with a cover about 18 inches in height, handsomely cut and shaped, with a square base and a fine spiked cover. It is undoubtedly one of the finest examples of early Waterford glass which it has been my privilege to inspect. Genuine Waterford glass is characterized by a peculiar bluish tint in its body, due, it is generally recognized, to the presence of lead, but attributed by some to some peculiar quality of the flint employed, which was obtained from pits in the vicinity. Personally, I lean to the former hypothesis. Cork glass, on the other hand, is distinguishable by a pale yellow or amber tint, in all probability the result of the presence of iron. These tones are characteristic, for though the colouring of glass has been brought by modern workers to a fine art, yet no one has succeeded in exactly reproducing them so that, to the expert eye, the genuine old Irish glass is unmistakable. About the year 1753, the Dublin Society offered a premium for the establishment of a glass factory in County Cork. There seems, however, to have been some reluctance in taking advantage of the offer, for it was not until 1782 that the first glass factory was established there. Then Atwell Hayes, Thomas Burnett, and Francis Richard Roe demanded assistance from Parliament in carrying on the industry. They proposed to erect 2 houses, one for bottles and one for window glass, and from there the advertisements appearing shortly after in the Irish papers, offering to sell glass at their manufactory and guaranteeing satisfaction. It would appear that their venture met with considerable success. From 1780 onward, Cork exported a good deal of glass. In the year 1801 alone, the considerable number of 11,000 drinking glasses was sent to America, Portugal, and various other places abroad. While in the next year there is record of 6,129 dozen bottles and 40,000 drinking glasses being shipped abroad, which indicates a considerable output. The trouble involved in founding such an industry in those days must have been considerable. In this case, 2 years were taken up in procuring the necessary concessions. But the industry, once started, took firm root, and the advertisements appearing in the press, in particular the Hibernian Chronicle of May 1784, and the Cork New Evening Post of 1792, copies of which are preserved in the Museum of Dublin Antiquities, indicate what progress it was making, and incidentally possess a curious interest from their quaint wording in setting forth. The following is an example. The choicest glasses from Waterford, decanters, rummers, drawers and basins, flutes, hobnobs, crofts and finger basins, proof bottles, goblets, cans and wines, peach jugs, liqueurs and gardevines, salts, mustard, salads, butter, keelers, and all that sold by other dealers, engraved or cut in newest taste, or plain, whatever pleases best. Lustres repaired or polished bright, and broken glasses matched at sight. All globes of every size and shape, or old ones hung and mounted cheap. In style, as we have already said, Waterford glass closely approximates to Old English of the Georgian period. If anything, however, the cutting was deeper, the angles and spikes being often so sharp as to make it dangerous to grasp the pieces tightly. Numerous table services of glass of this period exist, as well as decanters, punch bowls, and dishes. All are deeply cut, the chief designs being the hobnail and diamond patterns. Sometimes we find fluted stems and finely cupped spiked or striped sides. The majority of the larger pieces, such as the punch and salad bowls, had square feet or bases, which, while possibly adding to their stability, certainly enhanced the beauty of their appearance. The salad bowl shown on the left of figure 31 is an excellent example. The collar or turnover at the rim is remarkable for its depth and also for its superb cutting. The bowl on the right is a remarkable specimen of very uncommon type. It is oval in shape, a shape not easily blown even at the present time, and has facet cutting upon the outside, as well as a particularly fine cut scalloped edging. The base too is in admirable keeping with the rest of the design. Figure 32 is another particularly fine piece of waterford glass. Worthy of note is an example of hobnail cutting, as well as for the depth of its collar and its general effectiveness. The celery bowls shown in figure 31 are also admirable specimens. That on the left is wasted and is strawberry cut. The center one is an example of fine fluted and diamond cutting, with a square base and domed foot, and on the one on the right has a collar and is flat cut on the middle of the bowl. Oval or oblong dishes for fruit or sweetmeats were often made with fan-shaped rims and sides, high in the center, then sloping downwards, to rise again to an equal height at the ends. Old Irish cut-glass salt cellars are greatly sought after nowadays for the dinner table, and have, with collectors, almost completely ousted the old Georgian silver salts. They were often exquisite in design and shape, some being miniature models of the large punch bowls or sweetmeat glasses. The illustration is of an imitation pair in old Sheffield stands. The water jugs also are of exceptional interest. They were usually shaped on a fine and graceful model, and are heavily cut into step or deep-ringed incisions, generally with massive ornamentations of leaves or panel cuttings round the neck, and diamond cuttings and flat fluting at the base. So eager indeed were certain of the designers to ensure that no part of the jug should be without its ornamentation, that they went so far as to adorn the handles with deep cutting inside, and placed a huge, deeply cut star on the outside bottom. Weighty substance and wealth of ornament are thus characteristic of Waterford glass, although it is, of course, impossible to say that all Irish glass displaying these qualities came from the Waterford houses. The jugs illustrated in figure 30 are among the finest specimens in existence, and are from the Dublin Museum collection. A careful inspection will reveal most of the characteristics to which we have referred. The figure on the left is the type most familiar nowadays. The neck is step cut, the body is strawberry, and the base is flat fluted. The centerpiece is a jug of the earliest shape and is curiously cut. A band of strawberry cutting round the widest part of the body is flanked, top and bottom, by bands of leaf cutting. The lip seems so disproportionately large as to give the piece an almost top-heavy appearance. The handle too is abnormally large, and is incised on the inside. Its interest is rather more historical than artistic. The third, on the right, is a fine example of flat cutting. The rim being scalloped and the handle deeply scored with niches, besides being lavishly ornamented. The base is curious in that it is domed, a very unusual form for a jug. Many of the Waterford pieces, especially the preserved jars with turnover collars, were made with covers to protect the upper rim. These are very attractive pieces and are found in all shapes and sizes. The smaller ones, both with and without collars, are exceedingly pretty and not difficult to acquire. The four shown in figure 33 give an excellent idea of what to expect. Each is distinct, both as regards design and ornamentation. It will be interesting for the reader to compare them and discover the characteristic features of each. The decanters which came into vogue in the 18th century display the same general character and are very similar in type to the English decanters of the same date. Three of them are shown in figure 34, and may be of service to compare them with the four shown in figure 14. The stopper of the central one is of the button type, those of the other two being of the more common mushroom variety. The beautiful pair shown in figure 35 deserve a word of special mention. One feature is the lavish use of step cutting around the neck and shoulders, and another the strawberry empanelement on the body. The fine diamond cutting and fluting of the stoppers are also worthy of notice. Drinking glasses, as we have said, were produced in large numbers. They are generally of two types. The one barrel or bowl-shaped after the fashion of our English rummers. The other straight-sided glasses on stems. The specimens shown in figure 12 give some idea of their general style, as well as of the variety of ornament employed. It may be well to point out here, for the benefit of those who desire to acquire specimens of Waterford glass, some of the many differences which may be detected between the genuine article and its modern imitation. To begin with a simple example, the prettily shaped wine glasses of the period, with air-threaded or twisted stems, are generally reproduced accurately enough. But the twist or thread in the old glass has a pronounced milky appearance, as compared to the dead white of the modern reproductions. The twist is also not so regular and even, and the feet are larger and apparently slightly clumsier in the authentic specimens. Numerous connoisseurs attach importance to the center of the foot, which is usually rough and uneven in the old glass. Another test frequently relied upon by collectors is the fact of the foot being turned over, a fashion which, it is said, was followed only with the earliest specimens. While, however, this may provide corroborative evidence, I should be sorry to rely upon it as a sole test. Probably the best criterion of all is the color. It has, as I've already noted, a dull bluish tinge, readily recognizable when the specimen is held up to the light. The better kinds, too, have almost invariably a large and deep-cut star on the bottom. Cork glass is rarer than Waterford, a result due to the fact that the cork factories were in existence only for comparatively short time. The pieces, too, are slighter, less heavy and by no means so deeply cut. It is much frailer in appearance, and at the first glance less attractive. But its great beauty is a charming delicacy, both of colour and form, which grows upon one's taste. The wine glasses in particular would at once appeal to a connoisseur from this point of view alone. The three decanters shown in figure 34 need only be compared with the Waterford decanters shown elsewhere, for the lack of heavy cutting to be immediately noticed. The centre one is interesting as being a commemoration piece, probably made in the year when Cork Yeomanry was formed. Irish glass was not infrequently profusely engraved and gilt. The gilding was done during manufacture, the gold being burnt in by the aid of borax. In existing specimens, much of the gilding has been worn off, so that only traces remain. In cases where it has disappeared entirely, a careful scrutiny will show pits and roughnesses, indicating where the decoration formerly stood. Sometimes the places can even be discerned by the touch. Dutch, German, and Austrian reproductions have from time to time flooded the market to be sold to the unwary collector as veritable specimens of Irish art. But these, on examination, are found to be, as a rule, so coarse and unfinished in their execution that the fraud is obvious. The gilding in particular is far inferior to the work of the old craftsman, who are guided solely by the artist's desire for perfection, irrespective of toil or cost. Now and again specimens of Irish moulded glass crop up. These are chiefly pint and half-pint beer glasses, with fluted sides and somewhat sparse engraving. The moulded glass is of course easily detected, since the edges of the fluting are rounded and blunt. The pieces themselves are usually absurdly light if intended for cork glass, or clumsily heavy if they are intended to pass for the Waterford variety. A large field, therefore, opens to the average collector of Irish glass. It is wonderfully fine, and not too difficult to obtain. Many collectors, too, in their desire to acquire only the earliest specimens, overlook the cut glass altogether as too modern. In spite of this, Irish cut glass is now more valuable, and far more sought after than any other. After exhaustive inquiries, I am satisfied that in Ireland, England, France, and the United States, specimens of genuine Irish glass are still to be found, often in the most unlikely places, the property of persons who could not be expected to know their value, and of others who ought to, but do not. A little personal experience may be worth repeating here. I was in a small, dilapidated general shop near the London docks. The shopkeeper, fancying he detected in me a possible victim, drew my attention to a pair of celery glasses and began to descant upon their age, the difference between them and cork or Bristol glass, and so on. After I had examined them carefully and satisfied myself that they were genuine, they were about 10 inches high with very thin herringbone cutting upon their flat sides, I asked the price, which was absurdly high. Then, disclosing my identity, I asked what he would say if I told him they were not genuine, but only reproductions. To my utter astonishment, he exclaimed that he must have been done. The price, if they were any use to me, dropped considerably. Then I told him they were genuine, and sent a friend of mine, who is a collector, to purchase them, but not without the man endeavouring to obtain a price which was not only far above what he had asked me, but considerably above the real value of the articles. I record this episode for the benefits of my readers who may be tempted to depend on the seller's opinion for a guarantee of the genuineness of their finds. Generally speaking, the ordinary shopkeeper's knowledge is of the most superficial type, and should never be relied upon, while of course his interest lies entirely in one direction. And on that little anecdote of scheming shopkeepers, I'm going to call it a night. As always, if you'd like to pick up where we've left off, you can find the original on Project Gutenberg at the link in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepy Time Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to follow or subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get your new episodes whenever they come out. Good night, and sweet dreams.